Welcome. Let's go into the details now. It was identified as one of the biggest social and economic challenges facing Ghana more than a decade ago, when the country's population hit 25 million. Today, the housing remains one of the biggest needs of Ghanaians, with a housing gap at 1.7 million and projected to hit more than 2 million. Here. Many spend a fortune to find land and much more to build. Social housing schemes are almost non-existent, whilst landlords who manage to put up some structures exploit the ordinary Ghanaian in terms of rent charges. Many others who cannot afford the high rent charges, have had to make do with them marked by the street or under a bridge or some abandoned structure or kiosk. Some affordable housing projects started by the Kufuor administration before leaving office in 2008 were abandoned, whilst a plan by the Atta Mills administration to roll out the XTC affordable housing was scuttled in Parliament. Today, we'll hear from the Minister for Works and Housing and also the Tenants Union of Ghana, who are against affordable housing. We'll also hear from the Ghana Real Estate Developers Association, GREDA, as well. But we can take a look at the promise made by the current administration in its manifesto. Well, we'll bring you that graphics much later. But this morning, my colleague Maxwell Bagba caught up with the Works and Housing Minister, Samuel Attack, asked him about his big plan to provide a place for everyone to lay their head and still be sure they will not be paying through their nose for them. Maxwell is on the line right now. Hello, Maxwell.
Yeah, hello.
Maxwell, before we get into exactly what the minister wants to achieve with this trip, tell us what he's been doing so far.
Okay, well, Kitty, if you recall, during the version of the Honorable Minister, in fact, he made some bold statements that when he becomes minister, he will make sure that...
A bit of a noise in your background right now that interferes with what you're saying. If you could reposition, then you can begin to tell us what he's been doing so far.
Sorry, Kitty, actually in the background.
Okay, if you can hear me, Maxwell, reposition so we can avoid the noise and give us what the minister has been up to so far.
Oh, sure. Is it okay now, Kitty?
Sounds better.
Hello?
Sounds better. Go ahead, Maxwell.
Yes, so I was saying that if you recall, when the Honorable Minister was being vetted, in fact, he made some bold statements that when he becomes minister, he will make sure that they complete the affordable housing project by President Kufuor, continued by President Mahama, and then this new government will also. In fact, he actually stated that he would make sure that they complete the factors before they start putting up new ones. And as part of efforts to expedite action on the affordable housing project, I mean, he's installing some catchment area of the Tema Development Company Limited, formerly known as the Tema Development Corporation. Now, he's been visiting some of the affordable housing project sites. We actually went to the Stone site. We've been to the Naval housing unit site. We've also been to some other places, the Kaiser flat as well. In fact, at the Kaiser flat, when we visited, the minister actually was so excited because some quarters have occupied portions of the flat. In fact, that flat that I'm talking about is earmarked for demolition and then redevelopment. That will be happening in some few months, and it's also part of measures to bridge, the housing deficit. But earlier, we've been having interactions with him concerning how he hopes to bridge the housing, deficit that we experience as a country. In fact, he's been talking about a rural housing scheme. He said that will take center stage and that will be rolled out, in some few months. Because he believes that people who are living around places like Bonto on the Accra-Kumasi Road, we can actually put up some high-rise buildings in those places, what he describes as hinterland. It's just if you're able to put up those high-rise structures there and are able to develop the infrastructure around those areas, people will be more than willing to go and stay there. He actually bemoaned the fact where, some people living around, some parts of Accra and, endless hours in traffic. He said to be able to do this rural housing, scheme better, if you're able to roll it out in a very good way, as has been done in some other countries, we'll be able to, bridge the housing deficit. So he said there's one thing that will take, center stage months to come. We have also been talking about
all right, Maxwell, it appears we're having a serious challenge with your telephone line there. Maxwell Akpakpa has been following the Minister for Housing, Samuel Atachia, who is visiting Tema Industrial and Residential Hub there. We'll bring you some more as and when we're able to establish a clearer link with Maxwell Akpakpa. But let's continue the discussion here in the studio. Well, we have Frederick Opoku. He is Secretary for the General National Tenants Union of Ghana. Mr. Opoku, you're welcome to the show. Hi. It's good to have you. First tell us more about this, the union. What exactly do you do?
Thank you very much for such an opportunity for the union. The National Tenant Union of Ghana, in short, NATAC, is a like-minded group of persons in this country who believe issues regarding housing is a big one in terms of tenancy and rentals. And for that matter, we believe that there is a big problem between us and the landlords, which always bring a lot of conflicts and misunderstanding between us. The union realized that there's a big problem regarding the law which is regulating the tenancy in this country. As you may be aware of, Ghana has one particular rent law in this country, that is Act 220, and it clearly states what ought to be done and what not to be done. Okay. And that is clearly under the jurisdiction of rent control. But unfortunately, things have gone wayward. Nothing is working. Things have fallen apart. Tenants, there are millions of 10 million of them, are suffering without any safeguard.
You say that there have been serious challenges with the law that govern, tenant landlord relationship. Which of them? If you say there are serious problems, can you highlight a few?
Yes.
of them?
Thank you very much. I think Section 25, Section 5 of the law, that clearly states that if you are going to rent, or if a landlord, you're going to give your rent, your room out to whoever. We have rules of the game, and that rules has to do with how long you have to take. That is 6 months by law, clearly. But we have some punitive measures, like if one defies it, that person has to be punished by law.
But you do agree
and
that
punishment,
in this country...
and that punishment is what? It's what we have a problem with. Since 1963, that this law came into being, my sister. Imagine that if you flout the law, you are paying an amount of 1 cedi, let's say 1,000 pounds or so. Then, 1963. Today, it was reviewed in 1986. That talks about pay 10,000 Ghana cedis then, which is today 1 cedi. In default, you go 2 years. Okay. So each one of these kind of landlords are going with the leeway of what do you call it? Trying to run away from their responsibilities, and nothing catches up with them because the law is not working. That's what they think.
But talking about 6 months, if you say 6 months, you know that there are people who are usually standing by with their money. They are ready to pay for more than 6 months, and that is why you do that. You put it's an issue of supply and demand. You put the landlord in a very tight corner. A landlord who is looking for money and has someone who has money, they will always go for the one who has money.
That is why NATAC is now advising that it is a responsibility of the government not to run away from its responsibility. My sister, you are aware of this terminology called affordable housing. And what is affordable housing? Government upon government run away from their responsibility.
How do you mean?
Of course, because if you say affordable, it's relative. How much you earn might not be the same as equally. So the right word that
so what is affordable to me may not be affordable to someone else.
Exactly. Therefore,
affordable to
yes.
You,
for example, if you go to even the government affordable housing that they are trying to spearhead, one flat will give you $27,000 US. I'm telling you.
And that obviously is not affordable as far as you're concerned.
Now, the word that we really think that they have to start using and practicalizing it is social housing.
Okay. What exactly do you mean when you say social
housing? For the poor, housing for the vulnerable, housing for the sick, housing for the aged, housing for those who, for any reason, they are home and they don't have much to do. Like you see how our economy is broken now. People are suffering. Therefore, there must be a place for them. If you go to the UK, I know our ministers, Atachia, the new minister, also has been traveling to UK. Those who pass by Ayi and all those who have come and gone also pass through the same distance. If they go to the United Kingdom, don't they see condominiums? Don't you see that UK government is investing huge sum of money into housing now for their citizens to have a place to stay? If you're a student and you go to UK today, you go today and you have that some of the houses there for you to go and stay in.
That's not exactly true,
I'm telling
because
you,
I've studied in the UK.
Maybe.
It is not. You have to look for a house for yourself.
The truth is that aren't there a lot of social houses over there?
There are social housing, but it doesn't mean that if you're a student, you're
you do accept that?
entitled.
Do you have any in this country?
You see, it's the way you put it. That provision is there, but just so we are clear and we don't misinform our viewers, we need to make it clear. It's not like you can pack your bag and baggage from
I don't
Ghana
think that
and get, rephrase it.
The way I spoke, if you listen to me carefully,
to you.
What I'm saying is that if you go to UK, government has invested huge sum of money, and you have that kind of social housing over there.
Okay.
First of all, whether you are paying a cedi or pound or £1 or £2, it's not a matter here. Get yourself committed and get the social housing there. You are learning from others. Trust me. Therefore, you must look at what they are doing. Now, government in this country doesn't invest in housing any longer. Let me tell you, go to that affordable housing that they are putting in this country. One that was led by President Kufuor, that was led by President Mahama recently. Just go and ask how much is one, if it's really that affordable they are talking about. Okay. They are running from their responsibility.
Hold on for me. You say that government is running away from its responsibility. On the line now is Samuel Amegaibo. Samuel Amegaibo is with the Ghana Real Estate Developers Association, GRIDA. Sir, thank you very much for your time here on the Pulse. We've known about the housing deficits. We've always put it at 1.7. I mean, for about 2-3 years now, if I'm not mistaken, we've been dealing with this housing deficit. Hasn't anything changed per your statistics as of now?
I think, thank you for the opportunity anyway, and good afternoon to your panelists in the studio. The statistics, as you put it, that 1.7 million was as at 2010. Okay. And 7 years down the line. 7 years ago. Yeah, 7 years ago. So 7 years down the line, we think that it has gone beyond 2 million right now, because the annual demand, we were not able to meet it, and so the deficit kept mounting. And as we speak now, it is in excess of over 2 million. And
do we have statistics to support this?
It is just a projection from the 2010 statistics, and at that time we estimated that if we had to do something significant to confront it, then we had to do about 200,000 housing a year for the next 10 years. Okay. And we have not been able to do that. I think currently we are just producing around 35,000 to 40,000 units a year throughout the country.
Why, in your estimation, is this problem persistent and actually getting worse?
We haven't done very well. The private sector is a business environment, and they will look at the market, do as much as they can to make profit and also sustain their business. But if you look at housing cannot be left to the private sector. If we leave housing to the private sector, the word affordability will just remain on our lips, but in reality, it cannot happen. You need serious government intervention before you can confront housing at our level, because if you look at the purchasing power of our people and the earnings of our people, it is almost difficult to meet that price target that can satisfy a majority of Ghanaians. And so without any serious government intervention, no private sector can do anything related to affordable housing. And even in Ghana, we don't have anything called social housing at all.
Okay, so that is an issue that we've just been discussing in the studio. I have in the studio with me a representative from the National Union of Tenants here in the studio, and he's been talking about social housing. So you speak now about government intervention. Government has tried over the years to, put together all of these buildings. I mean, is this feasible? Talking about social housing, we've seen how difficult it has been for the government to push through and to actually finish some of these interventions. Is the call for some sort of social housing right now a feasible one? Is it not just, shouldn't we rather look at solutions that are workable, something that we can achieve in the shortest possible time?
Yeah, I just think that our government, successive governments, have not actually taken the bull by the horn to sort of look at the issues that is confronting us in this industry and actually come out with very pragmatic measures, and have just left everything to the private sector. Okay. If you look at even their own attempts, government's own attempts in producing housing they call affordable, at the end of the day has gone beyond affordability. And even some of the developers who don't get any help at all from government seems to be doing better in terms of their house prices than what even government would turn out and call it affordable. So there is some missing gap, a missing communication gap, a missing collaboration that we need to drive this agenda. And unfortunately, it has to be driven by government because government has a big stake in it. If you look at the price component of our housing, you realize that there are so many elements within the pricing that can be done by government. Looking at the issue of land, for example, if you buy land today, because we have a very bad land tenure system, you are confronted with paying more than one person to finally own it. So technically speaking, if the cost of the land in my price build up is say 5,000, because I've paid more than one person, I'm paying double or triple. And so definitely the price of land is going to be either 10 or 15,000 in my price component. So in that area, for example, we suggest that the land issues are becoming too many, and especially in Accra. So we need a legislation to drive the agenda to bring that sanity in the system where if you buy land, you are sure that you have bought it, and then there will be no encumbrances, issues that you have to deal with in the future. If we don't clear this off the way, that will be a very fundamental error that will have to be. Okay. That will not help us to come out with affordable pricing thing.
So now that is the first step. Okay, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, now coming to borrowing as well. If you go out there to borrow, first of all, there's no long-term financing. The last time I checked, our banks are only ready to lend us money for up to 2 years. And housing is not a supermarket item where you can produce milk or a tin of sugar, a can of sugar. It takes a long time. So if you don't have access to long-term financing, you are going to have problems. And borrowing today at over 30% is crazy. So if I'm selling a house which is around 100,000 Ghana cedis, and I have to borrow that money to build for my client, it tells you that on the onset, the client has to pay 132 just to make up for the borrowing that I have done to get the money to build the house for the person.
Right.
And then infrastructure costs. Developers are saddled with the cost of providing road, water, electricity, and all these amenities to their various sites. If government cannot do any of this, and the private developer will have to continue to provide for them, they don't get the money from any cheap source. They get it from very expensive source.
Okay.
Apart from paying the 32%, they have to pay for the cost of infrastructure.
Okay.
Can you imagine?
So far you've mentioned legislation on land tenure, borrowing, infrastructure.
For example, the land tenure, for example, I didn't complete that. We can see where other countries have adopted that every land in the country belongs to somebody, but then the administration of land is solely managed by the state. The state cannot sell land to more than two people at the same time. First of all, the thing has to be properly documented, and then we can have a software system that picks up each land. Okay. And then when sale is done, it is done one transaction. So anybody in this country who owns land cannot sell land on your own unless you pass it through the state.
Okay.
That is my simple solution to that one.
That is your suggestion, perhaps, to government. Yes, the legislation on land tenure, borrowing, checking the borrowing, and the cost of borrowing, and then infrastructure. But that seems to work a lot for private developers like yourself. How you speak about social housing. Social housing from your perspective, how can that work? If you could put that together briefly for me.
Yeah, for social housing, I think government has to take that responsibility. We did some study that we're trying to look at the purchasing power of Ghanaians, and that study gave out that it's only about 13% or so, 13 to 15% of Ghanaians who have the purchasing power to buy house. Okay, to actually buy house or build houses. Sorry, buy houses, and then we had about 60% that had the capability of renting. they could afford rental. I mean, at some reasonable prices, they could afford rental. Then we had about, I think, 25 or so who did not have any capacity to either own, build, or do anything. So those people are the people that the social housing are supposed to help. It is everywhere in the world. We have the vulnerable. We have people, no matter how much you try, they will be there, and you need to assist them. And that is where social housing comes in. And that one has to be taken up fully by government. Maybe the private sector can partner government in a way to do something about it. But I think government must take that responsibility on its head, and then can get private sector to assist them to do it.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for your time here on The Pulse. We've been speaking with Mr. Megaibo. He is with Grader, and he's been speaking to us about this matter. Let me conclude this conversation with you, sir. I mean, you're pitching the issue of social housing.
Sure.
How far have you taken this request, if I should put it that way?
The tenant union started this for some time now, let's say 4 years ago, but we've been undertone because we know this is a systemic problem or issue. So if you want to raise it, you have to map up and get all those who speak that goes deep into the public to also hear and support you. That is why I'm here today, to interact and to talk to Ghanaians, to educate people and to advocate on it, at least for the government to be aware that it has some responsibility that is running away from, so that it should quickly come and reconcile, and we do a lot of things. As your guest just spoke about, whether you like it or not, you have this group of people. So we shouldn't take it like we always affordable housing, and people are not aware of anything, and it goes like that. So I think that there is a problem, and that government can only resolve it if they commit themselves to how they want to commit themselves to education. This year, I'm aware, and you are aware, the government is ruling up to give secondary school free. National health insurance, investing a lot of money, but you know that housing is very important thing that we don't joke with it.
You think that government has not paid enough attention
not
to
at
housing?
all, absolutely not.
So on that basis, let me just take you through some of the things that the NPP administration promised, for which reason, of course, I believe the Ghanaian people voted for them. So here are a few of the details. If we could just go through it now, these are some of the promises that the NPP made about housing. So let's take it one after the other now, if we shall. Establish land banks with infrastructure such as roads, drainage, water and power in place for the development of affordable housing units on a public-private partnership basis. So if you heard Mr. Megaibo, this was what he was basically referring to, infrastructure. Let's look at housing promise number 2, abolishing the 5% VAT on real estate sales. That is the promise number 2. Let's look at promise number 3. Working with identifiable groups such as the Trades Union Congress, the Ghana National Association of Teachers, the National Association of Graduate Teachers, farmers groups and other trade groups to facilitate the construction of homes for their members through the provision of the appropriate financing guarantee. And I'd like for you to take note of these things so that we can touch briefly on that once I'm done with this. Promise number 4 is fully implement Section 103, that is the assignment of pension benefits for housing of workers of the National Pension Act 2008. And housing promise number 5. If we could just move to the housing promise number 5, that will be to facilitate also the development of an active mortgage market to expand mortgage loans to Ghanaians. And of course, Mr. Megaibo mentioned how just about 13 people are able to buy, 13% of people are able to purchase houses, and 50% are able to do renting. So you look at these 5 promises, sounds very good. Sure. And it looks like it's in line with what you're asking for.
Exactly.
There's a bit of social housing in there as well. Do all of these suffice for you? Is that okay? Is it enough to deal with the problems?
I think, let's hope so. This is the first time such promises have been said by these political parties or politicians.
Okay.
Since 1992. 2000, let's say from 2000 to date. 16 years down the line. Go and also watch from what Professor Mill said, what John Mahama said, and what Nana said, and even half of President Kufuor. But he tried to walk the talk.
He started something.
At least he tried to walk the talk.
Okay.
And at least came out with something. Unfortunately, the commitment to finish was not there. And that's what we think, that government or politicians are not emphasizing, are not doing much to practicalize what they say. And that is what we are surprised about.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. That's what we are even surprised about.
Okay.
But we believe that Nanado has also come, and he also brought about 5 of these things that probably he believed that he can do. But we think that we should give him the chance. But as far as the tenant union we are concerned, we will do a lot to make sure that each one of what has been said will be actualized. For that one, we will assure you that we will do. That each one of what has been said will be actualized, because the tenant union has come to make sure that they will do as much as possible to commit government to be responsible and act accordingly. The time has passed whereby politicians just come to occupy space in their manifestos and say whatever, and they go with impunity. Because after all, people don't look up to housing. If it's about education, fine. If it's about health, fine. But this time around, trust me, my sister, housing is going to be center point of discussion in this country. That if care is not taken, we are going to ensure that as many people as we can convince and influence to vote in a certain direction. If you're not going by it, we have to vote against you, because more than 11 million people are suffering. Excuse me, how many votes brings government to power? It's about just 5 million and over. Is that not so? 5 million over gives you the power. 10, 11 million people are suffering. So what are we talking about here? So these are all big issues that we think that this time around, this year.
Which is why I was asking you how far you're willing to take this push for social housing, and whether or not you, as a union, you'll be willing to engage government officials in that regard.
Exactly, because we propose, yes, we have been doing it. Unfortunately, something actually happened that I wasn't too happy about it. Before the minister came, I have to visit him, let him know what our plans are. And if there is any advice, the union can also give out to this gentleman. Unfortunately, he gave us a serious one, a very cold one, in his presence. I touched him, yes. He
was not open to you.
I was surprised, because you don't know it's somebody who comes to you. So at least respect the person, no matter how the person has dressed.
You think that the minister showed you some disrespect?
Seriously. And to me, I detected some kind of arrogance. But nobody is appointed to you are here to serve. So as far as we are fronting for more than 10 million people, we will not allow any individual who will serve as obstacle in the way of making sure that millions of Ghanaians get a place to sleep. Trust me.
Okay.
We are going to make sure that they walk their talk. We are going to make sure that what they have listed in that manifesto will not go without being what. If not, trust me, 2020, we are going to face one-on-one physical with them. And that we are not politicians, we are non-partisan. But this time around, whether you are MPP, whether you are NDC, whether you are PPP or CPP, you must know that you rent, and that you must be responsible and take the government to
Thank you very much for coming through to the studio. Frederick Opoku is with the National Union, Secretary of the National Union of Tenants of Ghana, speaking about those issues there. I'm going to take a very quick break. When I return, President Kufuor over the weekend, actually on May Day, did mention what's happening with housing in this country, and he draws some parallel between that and the prison service. When I return, I have the PRO for the prison service in the studio, and we'll continue with this discussion. We'll actually be wrapping up that discussion. Please stay with us.